As many as 86% of managers say they struggle to get their teams to use AI effectively. In other words, AI has created a brand new management challenge. Senior management is always asking why results haven't improved even though everyone has access to AI tools. Employees are producing reports much faster, and they often look polished on the surface, but they lack depth, prioritization, and clear practical answers. And in the end, you're still the person standing in the middle. You're fixing the output, protecting quality, explaining progress, and then continuing to push the team to move faster. With AI now part of the workplace, you no longer simply manage who does what. You actually have to manage how the entire team thinks, makes decisions, and takes responsibility for results. The challenge is that traditional management frameworks aren't always built to handle these modern AI capabilities. In this video, we're going to walk through 3 structural shifts that help you stop managing manual daily tasks and start building a high-performing team that can scale with AI. Now that we've identified the management problem as an operating system issue, let's move into the first shift. How do you plan your work? Traditional operational planning usually starts with headcount. You look at how many people are on your team, calculate their working hours, and divide project timelines based on those numbers. And yes, this process used to work. But in an AI-enabled work environment, this approach can create a serious waste of capacity, because an employee who knows how to use AI effectively can often handle 3 to 4 times more execution work than the standard baseline. So to fix this, you need to change your planning framework. Before assigning any task to anyone, classify every workflow into 2 clear categories. The first category is AI execution. This includes information synthesis, first rough drafts, structured data processing, and recurring report generation. The second category is human judgment. This includes strategic decision-making with uncertainty, building high-value relationships, resolving cross-functional bottlenecks, and designing the original architecture of systems. Your plan should protect and prioritize the thinking energy of the human judgment group first. This matters because these are the decisions where your people create the most value. You schedule your team's work around critical decisions, and then use AI to automate the execution layer of the remaining work. Now, you can make this whole allocation process much easier by building a custom gem inside Gemini. This helps you stop planning from scratch and start each month with a clear operating framework guided by a preset system. We've already designed this custom gem for you, so you don't need to spend time setting it up. The link is in the comments below this video. Just click the link, open the gem, and use it inside your own Gemini account. To use it, first prepare a file with your list of tasks, projects, or work goals. Then, type this command into the chat box. Help me classify the project list in the attached file. This file can be a Word document, a PDF, or a Google Sheet. For each project, add 1 short sentence describing the scope of work. The more specific your description is, the more accurate the classification will be. The system will automatically divide your operating plan into 2 groups: tasks that AI can execute and decisions that require human judgment. For complex projects, the gem will also break the work into phases. It will show you which parts AI should handle first and which parts your team needs to review, refine, or complete. The gem also creates ready-to-use prompt templates for each task that can be done with AI. This helps your team start automating right away without having to write every prompt from scratch. The second shift is about how you delegate work. The most common way to assign work is to give someone a checklist and set a deadline. When AI takes over the execution layer, this exact loop can turn your employees into delivery people. They receive a task from you, copy and paste it into an AI tool, download the result, and then submit it back to you. There's no real ownership, no strategic thinking, and very little quality control in that process. Because AI output often looks polished on the surface, you may not notice the lack of deep thinking until you try to use that output to make a real business decision. That's when the gaps appear. To fix this, focus on assigning clear, measurable outcomes tied to explicit quality standards. The key is to frame the assignment as a problem that requires real human judgment to solve instead of a mechanical activity to complete. Let's look at a practical example. If you need to evaluate the current state of customer retention, a pre-AI manager might tell an employee to summarize this month's customer feedback into a report. A few years ago, this would have taken a human several hours to do because they would have to read all the comments and think about how to summarize them. But nowadays, this is an operational task that AI can execute quite well without much human involvement. The AI-savvy manager would structure this project differently. They would ask the employee to summarize, see the results, and then find out why. If this month's contract renewal rate dropped below target, then understand why, and more importantly, propose one specific action that we can implement within the next 2 weeks. With AI, the old adage, "Come to me with solutions, not problems," rings true today more than ever. These two requests may sound similar, but they're actually quite different, right? The first request describes an activity. That means the employee is done as soon as the report is generated, even if AI did most of the work. The second request doesn't dictate the method, data sources, or format. Those execution details can be managed by the employee and AI together. The task you're actually assigning is a complex problem that requires context. AI cannot solve this on its own because it doesn't know your customer history, it doesn't understand your team's internal commitments, and it cannot take responsibility if the proposed action fails. When you structure assignments around clear, problem-based outcomes, your team has a better way to check their own work before submitting it. And there's one more thing to keep in mind. Before assigning a problem, you also need to be clear how much time the work should reasonably take and what level of depth is expected from the final output. For the same task, if you still give your team the same amount of time as before, then they'll finish the work well before the deadline, since AI has significantly shortened the execution time, and they could just sit on it until the due date. So you won't see any real gains in productivity and time saved. On the other hand, if the deadline is too short, employees might use AI to generate a quick answer instead of spending enough time verifying the data, analyzing the context, and developing a recommendation that's truly useful. One way to define this timeline is based on the level of depth that you need. Earlier, we talked about two types of tasks: the parts that AI can execute and the parts that require human judgment. The part that AI handles should take much less time because summarizing information, creating first drafts, or processing data doesn't need to take as long as it used to. Next, the part that requires human judgment still needs a realistic window so your team has enough time to cross-check the data, analyze the context, and think deeply enough to take full responsibility for the final recommendation. With these shifts, you start to break the constant cycle of micromanaging at the end of every task. This allows you to take back your time for higher-level work and business growth decisions. The third shift is about restructuring your team. Traditional business teams are usually structured around job functions. You have someone who specializes in content writing, a data analyst, and someone who manages projects. This structure made sense when each function required a different set of manual human skills to get the work done. But when AI can draft content, analyze spreadsheets, and update project progress at the same time, managing only through rigid job titles becomes less useful. So the operational question you need to ask is, what is the core strength of each person on my team that AI tools cannot easily replicate? Now, let's look at a current marketing operations team. Once AI has taken over a large portion of writing, data tracking, and project updates, you may no longer need 3 separate production groups working in isolation. Instead, you audit your human resources. You may realize that one team member has deep intuitive insight into customer psychology. Another person is excellent at building long-term strategic relationships with distribution partners. A third person has sharp systems thinking and can detect operational friction before it causes delays. And maybe a fourth person is very good at asking unexpected questions that prevent the team from falling into groupthink, or something along those lines. From there, you can restructure the workflow around those human-driven zones. AI handles the volume, while your people apply their unique strengths to guide, refine, and increase the business impact of that volume through tasks that require human judgment. This also changes your hiring profile. You need to stop hiring people who simply know how to perform a manual task. Instead, start looking for people who can show strong business judgment and how to use AI tools to multiply their personal productivity. All three of these operational upgrades require a deeper shift in how you develop your own thinking as a manager, because your team's maximum capacity will often be limited by your own ability to think clearly, diagnose problems, and design better systems. Think of your business like a factory assembly line. When one machine produces a defective part, a junior worker may replace the faulty part and keep the line running, and that fixes the surface level symptom. However, an engineer stops the line, looks at the blueprint, and asks why the calibration software allowed that error to happen in the first place. That fixes the system design flaw. When your team makes an operational mistake with AI, such as handing over a customer report that contains inaccurate numbers generated by AI, a pre-AI manager may simply tell the employee to be more careful next time. That treats the symptom, and there's a good chance the same mistake will happen again the next month. To fix issues at the system level, you need an AI error audit model that is effective, but still simple enough to use on a regular basis. We can easily start with what I call the 4P model: prompt, proof, pattern, and person. First is prompt, which is basically how you guide your AI. Most of the time, the issue comes down to a prompt that's too vague, doesn't clearly state the goal, or completely misses the quality standard and output format. You always have to be explicit about what the AI is not allowed to assume. Next, we have proof, which is simply the evidence or data you give the AI to work with. If your team doesn't provide clear and accurate source data, the system can easily create an answer that sounds reasonable on the surface, but it's going to be way off from your actual business situation. The third P is pattern, and this just means providing a strong sample output for the AI to reference. If the team doesn't have a good example for the AI to learn from, the model will usually just choose a safe generic answer that doesn't really meet the requirements. And the last part of the loop is person, which is the human role at the end of the process. After the AI creates the first draft, we need someone checking the numbers, comparing the output against the context, and truly taking responsibility for the final conclusion. So when a junior analyst gives you work that doesn't meet your standards, you don't need to try to guess where the problem came from. Instead, you can use the 4P model to find where your analyst went wrong. Talk to them and ask what prompt they used, what data or evidence they relied on, what reference sample they followed, and which part of the judgment was handled by a human. Now you have a clear basis to compare and identify where the issue sits. The prompt was unclear, the data wasn't enough, the samples provided weren't good enough, or the employee didn't actually verify and take ownership of the final conclusion. This approach allows you to fix the issue from the source instead of receiving the same subpar output again next time. On the other hand, if the result is strong, that 4P breakdown becomes a reusable asset for the whole team. You can save the effective prompt, the trusted data sources, the useful output sample, and the way the employee applied their judgment, so the team doesn't have to start from scratch next time. When you stop putting out fires and start redesigning the fire prevention system, something interesting happens. Your team no longer needs you to solve the same old problems. They begin solving those problems themselves because the system has been designed to guide them toward better decisions from the beginning. That's the real value of management with AI. Focus on building systems that help your team work independently and make better choices from the start. At this point, let's look at this again. Your role as a manager is not to stand at the end of the process and catch every mistake in every output, right? W. Edwards Deming, a pioneer in quality management, once said, "Cease dependence on inspection to achieve quality. Eliminate the need for inspection on a mass basis by building quality into the product in the first place." To put it simply, don't rely on checking at the end to create quality. We need to build quality into the process from the start. And this is exactly how it works when you have AI as an everyday tool. AI makes it faster, cheaper, and easier to create output. Now, because of that, the thinking standard behind that output matters more than ever. So you need to become the person who raises the standards of the whole system. Build a process where quality doesn't depend on your constant presence at every step. Employees should know how to check their own work before submitting it. Good processes are automatically saved as shared assets. Old mistakes don't keep repeating. This means the capacity of the whole team can grow without pulling you back into the loop of checking every small detail. And when that happens, you regain the most valuable thing that being a manager is all about: the time to truly manage. You have more time for higher level decisions, more energy to develop your people, and more capacity to grow the team without getting stuck editing every small task. I'm Lynn from Implementa Labs. We share the best options for non-technical professionals to implement AI and scale their operations. Hit subscribe, build your system, and I'll see you in the next video.